Guys, it's happening. I have been saying for a very long time that we need to talk about the Iranian people getting armed. Okay. And I already showed this on the live show, but I want to show it here as well because I want to see what you guys think about this. And first of all, before I show this, while I'm playing it for you guys, just remember me, just play this in your head. Armin saying, I told you, okay? Because I've been saying that this should be part of the conversation for more than a month now. So the fact that they are talking about it right now, which is arming the Iranian people, right? It shows that we here are ahead of other people, okay? I was like, we at least need to start talking about it, okay? And now we're talking about it. So watch this, okay? I have to first share it on StreamYard before I share it here. I have to get the order of sharing right, or else it's going to mess up everything. All right. Hopefully this is going to work both sides. Yes.
Look.
So this is Trump, okay?
Look, if they had guns, which they don't have, if they had guns were sent and other people took those guns. If they had guns, they would fight back. I'm convinced of that. But you can't have it.
So this first part is not new, okay? But bear with me. He says something here that is new.
An unarmed population against people with...
Wait, let's go back because I interrupted him in the wrong place.
Look, if they had guns, which they don't have, if they had guns were sent and other people took those guns. If they had guns, they would fight back. I'm convinced of that. But you can't have an unarmed population against people with AK-47s and stand there, even if you have 250,000 people. You started off by asking me, would I like to see them? And I'm very torn on it because they lost 42,000 people in the first 2 weeks. I don't really want to see that. They have to have guns. And I think they're getting some guns.
This part is new. He's saying, I think they're... So saying that they should have guns is one thing. But he here says, I think they're getting some guns. So that is a big news. Let's just
have guns. And I think they're getting some guns. As soon as they have guns, they'll fight like as good as anybody there is. So,
okay, so that was big. That was huge news. And then let's go to him here. So let me share StreamYard first, and then hopefully school second. Okay, there we go. So let's watch this. Somebody asks him again.
To take over their regime. Do you plan to arm them soon?
I don't want to say that, but yeah.
So the question is like, do you plan to arm them?
To take over their regime. Do you plan to arm them soon?
I don't want to say that, but yeah, I mean.
So he's saying, I don't want to say that, but yeah. Okay, so that but yeah part is significant to me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you guys let me know. Look at this.
To take over their regime. Do you plan to arm them soon?
I don't want to say that, but yeah, I mean, people say, why aren't they protesting? They want to protest, but they don't have any guns. So you could have 200,000 people protesting and have 5 or 6 sick people with guns. And when they start shooting them right between the eyes and you see a guy fall and another one fall and you have no guns, very few people would be able to stand there and do it. I understand. I tell them not to. Don't forget, they killed 42,000 people last month. 42,000 unarmed protesters. They had no guns. So they had a 250,000 people crowd, and they had snipers. They had 4 or 5 snipers in buildings up high. And you're standing there, and all of a sudden the guy on your left goes down, and somebody. That's what happened with the women protest. They had 200,000 women protesting a year ago, and everyone thought that was the end of Iran. And then all of a sudden, a woman dropped dead with a bullet right there, always right there. Then another woman dropped, and then the word started to spread, and then there was panic, and then they ran. And so I don't want that to happen. We don't need that. We don't need it. But the only reason that they want to protest so badly, but they don't have weapons. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. And then we had Lindsey Graham. Hold on. Let me do StreamYard first and then school second. So Lindsey Graham is also talking about this now.
We don't need American boots on the ground. We've got millions of boots on the ground in Iran. They just don't have any weapons. Give them the weapons so they can rise up like we did to destroy this regime. A Second Amendment solution, I think, would go a long way to ending this war. We don't need American.
So I have a much longer version of this discussion. Let me know if you guys want me to play it. But before I do that, because Lindsey Graham has a lot of interesting points about this. But before I do that, let me actually go to you guys. Hold on, share this. Yes, okay, share this. And then hold, let me see, stop sharing from school. Okay. Oh, no, I made a mistake. All right, give me a second. I need to share. I need to bring you back guys in. All right, so you guys go to the twos and let's see the people who put 2 in the chat. Let's see what you guys have to say about this before I bring Lindsey Graham's 8-minute video talking about all of this, because I do want to play that if we have time.
Okay, sketches first.
Sketches first. Okay, great.
Now, the first thing I would notice is that he said, I think that's happening. That would tell me that already happened, because he wouldn't say that if they're not on the way. They could be intercepted. He wouldn't put that out there if there was any ambiguity, if he didn't know who has them, if they're not already delivered. That makes me think they're already delivered. They're already, like, the people are like getting them in their hands, like they got them, because it would be terrible operationally for you to tell them, oh, I'm sending weapons. Then they would be looking for a weapon drop that's incoming. So him saying that, I think they're going to get it. That probably means they already got it. I don't put as much weight on but yeah. The first part, I think they're going to get it. I think they're going to get them. That makes me think they already have them. And the Lindsey Graham thing weighs heavier for me on it. That also makes me think that there's already something moving. So I think that this isn't when they say checkmate, when you say checkmate, it's that it's the final move. Right? I remember that you said that in one part they said checkmate when you were in the Iran Revolution Live. I think it was in a tweet or something. So I think they're in the final move. I think the weapons are already there. It would be operation. Remember, he did not say that they had sent any weapons till they already had the problem with the separatists. That did not get out. While those weapons were going, nobody knew anything. We only started hearing murmurings about it after they already had the problem and it was over. He already like, yeah, that didn't work out. But those weapons got in there before anyone and got spread before anyone knew about it. And if that's the pattern, that makes me think these weapons are already in.
Okay, interesting.
Okay, next response from Daniel.
So just to add what Sketch was saying, but in the political and the informational level, right? So prior to these days, nobody was like in the media talking about how much Iranians got killed on the left side of the media, at least. No, everyone tried to shut it, to not speak about it, to silence it. But now Trump himself goes on the news and just saying, "Oh, they shoot 42,000 people," and he builds it up. He makes it so more people will get with the new reality that the Iranians has the right to make a armed uprising. I think that is what they're cooking, because I believe, personally, it's my belief, I can check it, I can prove it. I believe the arms war in Iran since the first day of the uprising of the protest, but there was some restriction that those who had guns were told to stay home or something. That's what I think.
Yeah.
All right,
So,
Ali.
Ali. Okay.
Oh, go ahead first.
No, I'll put a 2 in the chat. Okay, Ali.
Yeah, Sketch brings up a great point. He can't talk about it if it's not already happening to a point where the IRGC can't stop it. And then Eric said something in the chat not so long ago. He was saying that we were arguing against the arming of the protesters because how is it going to reach the right people? So that's why they tried to use the Kurdish separatist groups, because they actually already have channels of entering northwest Iran for a while now, and they were going to try to distribute weapons that way. So that didn't work, which means the next group you had to try had to be even more trustworthy, like 100% trustworthy. We can't fail again. And they already have these channels of distribution, and that's already happened. So I don't know whose theories or what on who that group could be, but yeah, it's great that this is happening. My concern about it is that obviously untrained people with firearms does mean more casualties.
One question before we go to the next person. Do we know for sure? Nothing is for sure. But can we really say that President Trump would not talk about this unless they already done this? Like, where are we getting that information from? Like, how are we coming up with that?
It's based on a logical assumption that if he's talking about it, the IRGC will listen and be like, let's try and stop that. Let's try and be more aware, set up some operations to check for these weapons.
But you also do sometimes hear that President Trump sometimes says things that people within the army or the intelligence would wish he could keep a secret. So how do we know that this is not one of those situations?
It could be. Either way, if it's true, then it's already done. If it's not true and he's maybe bluffing about it, the regime will probably spend some resources or at least be very paranoid.
Yeah, even here's the thing. Let's say, for example, there's a utility in announcing this even before it happens, okay? Because at the end of the day, if the Iranian people are getting armed, if the regime already suspects that's something that the Americans and Israelis want to do, right? So I don't know how much of an advantage it's going to give them if it's announced, if this is going to be something that they're looking into. So I don't think it gives the regime that much of an advantage, but also them worrying about it more before it even happens could have its own benefits.
The people will also feel better. They'll feel more supported.
Yeah, exactly. It might give them motivation and feel like, oh, okay, help is on the way. Yeah, Amy, we're gonna get to you. I think Danny saw you too in the chat. So okay. Thank you, Ellie. So let's go to the next.
Ian?
Ian?
Hey, how's it going? Okay, so I'm listening to this discussion about Trump pre-announcing that he thinks there are already guns in the country. And we don't know why he's doing that exactly, but it might be that he's talking about guns when their focus should probably be on short-range FPV drones. And I know I've been very skeptical about long-range drones for protecting protesters, but I think that short-range FPV drones in the hands of Garda Javidan are a much different use case. So my feeling is that could be potentially the most effective offensive weapon that they could be supplied with, because they can be operated somewhat anonymously and the IRGC has almost no experience countering them. So that's what I would expect if we start seeing FPV attacks on the IRGC, that this is evidence that these weapons have been moved into the country. And then to support the idea that the weapons are already there, I would point out that there were 2 border crossings with Iraq that were struck by the Israelis during the airstrikes, and they took major casualties at both of them. So I would assume the reason you would strike those border crossings is because you wanted to move equipment into the country. That's my theory. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. I'll say my thoughts when my turn. Yeah. Okay.
Jeffrey?
Sorry, I was a little late. I had to do his other associated work. So regarding the strategic signaling from Senator Lindsey Graham, it very much comes off as the context is that we don't need U.S. troops on the ground. We have millions of troops. That's Iranian civilians, which has always been the end goal, is ultimately to arm Iranians, civilians, and anti-Mullah and other members of the anti-Mullah diaspora within Iran after the regime has been weakened to a point where Iranians can have the best chance at liberating their country from the Mullah regime that's illegally occupied Iran since '79. That being said, the nature of Senator Graham's most recent statement, this weather's giving me a headache, is that it very much comes off, on top of your observations, high level urgency for a quote unquote policy shift to arm Iranian civilians and opposition as a path to topple the regime, and not in the sense that the policy is not there, rather to just put more emphasis on that needs to occur. So if you think about coterminously what President Trump has said, I think they're getting some guns to fight effectively. He referenced past U.S. efforts. I don't know if you guys talked about that. Forgive me for coming in late. To get weapons to protesters via Kurdish intermediaries and fighters, and how those guns were diverted and appropriated by elements of the Kurdish diaspora that were not so trustworthy and never reached the Iranians on the ground. That said, the context of his statements very much come off or signal, at least to the best of my understanding, that while he's frustrated about that failure, it also hints that the idea is very alive that they are getting some guns. Read, there are current efforts to use different pipelines and locations inside Iran and or active channels and special providence and borders that some people have already talked about to arm Iranian civilians and or resistance. As was said, there's going to be obviously no effort to disclose active specific efforts for operational security concerns. Ian's very right in the sense that short range, not just FPV, just short range armed drones are very much will provide Iranian resistance disproportionate capability against the Mullah regime. So there's that there, although the Mullah remnants are almost assuredly going to try and leverage things like Kalinkas and jammers and coke cages and all this other stuff. It's not just FPV drones. That's a big part of it that allows you to do other things. There's all kinds of different asymmetric counters to, say, Mullah douchebags and their proxies driving down the street in a bullshit technical when they get hit with, say, I don't know, an explosive form penetrator that's made very easily. In other words, the good guy version of what Soleimani did to my buddies, except for it's not going to be so indiscriminate, right? That's all I'll say on that.
All right, Armin, you're next.
Yeah, so going back to what Jeffrey was saying, the President Trump confirmed that they tried to arm the Iranian people much closer to when President Trump announced that help is on the way and told the Iranian people to be ready to rise up. It seemed like when he said help is on the way, he was also referring to the weapons that are on the way. And the weapons never showed up because the people that they decided to use to arm the Iranian people were Kurdish separatist groups. And I think, again, remember, it's very important for us to say Kurdish separatist groups because I don't want us to come off as anti-Kurdish. I know you guys already know this, but we have to say this every time. The vast majority of Kurdish Iranian people are patriotic Iranians who hate the Kurdish separatist groups even more than the rest of Iranians, because the Iranians hate the Kurdish separatist groups for challenging Iran's border integrity, which is the most sacred thing to Iranians. But the Iranian Kurds hate them double because they hate them for that reason, but also for the fact that it makes so many people think that Kurdish people are anti-Iranian, and they hate them for that even more sometimes, right? And the Kurdish Iranians think that they have to work so hard to show that these people don't represent them and demonstrate that they're patriotic, demonstrate that they're against these groups, and they feel like every time, and they hate it when people refer to them as the Kurds. These people don't represent us. Stop calling them the Kurds. So we always have to remember the Iranian Kurds who are against all of this, right? And also remember that a lot of these groups are communist groups, which is something that we fight against, but the separatist groups. So if they actually talked to us in this group, we would tell them that's not a good idea. Don't use these groups, because these separatist groups, they're not anti-Islamic Republic, they're anti-Iranian. And I've shown on my shows how they talk about Iran. They don't, every time they're talking about the Islamic Republic in their posts, they make it clear that their enemy is every Iranian, not just the Islamic Republic. They make that very clear. They consider anybody who thinks to be Iranian or Persian to be fascist or their oppressor. So they're against the Iranian people. So giving weapons to a group that is anti-Iranian people and asking them to give this to the Iranian people is like I don't know. I could have told you that's not going to go well. So the strategy that I've already mentioned here many times, and the more we go forward, I realized how I was about the strategy, because everything points to the fact that this is the best way to go about it, is to liberate Bandar Abbas, bring the Ukrainians in, and just do a repeat of what happened in Syria. There's so many benefits in it. And again, not just guns, as Ian just mentioned, drones. It's mostly drones. And Jeffrey has been pointing to this as well. Drones and guns. So there's so you need to. Why Bandar Abbas? Bandar Abbas because it's right next to the Strait of Hormuz. So you get an immediate win. Which gives you political capital, because it's not about liberating Iran at first. If you make an Iranian army in Bandar Abbas and starts expanding it, even before you liberate Iran, you're liberating the Strait of Hormuz, which that victory will give you the political capital to continue with this operation. So you liberate Bandar Abbas, you ask Princess of Pahlavi to announce to the Garda Javidan, the Immortal Guards, on all the freedom fighting Iranians who want to liberate their country to come to Bandar Abbas. And there's a 3-step process. You vet them, which is very important. You don't just release guns, not knowing who's going to get in Iran, not knowing who's going to get the guns. You vet them, you train them. That's what the Ukrainian soldiers are there for. You train them with how to use guns and drones, and then you arm them. Again, so this army will expand, and it will liberate the Strait of Hormuz. But also, it works because we saw it happen in Syria. The Ukrainians trained the Assad opposition in Syria on how to use drones, and it was so effective. So we're not basically suggesting something that hasn't been tried before. This is not fantasy. This has already been done. So we know that this has been tried. We also know that the Americans want to arm the Iranian people because we're now hearing it from them. We know that this has been in Syria, but also because it would be Ukrainian soldiers, then Americans could be, this is Iranian boots on the ground, and these are Ukrainian soldiers training them. So politically, it's easier to sell to an American audience as well. By the way, I have a video from Lindsey Graham that after all of this, I'm going to play, which kind of Lindsey Graham says something in there, which kind of makes me think that he also believes in the strategy that I just mentioned. And I've been saying this for a month and a half now. So I'll stop talking and see what you guys have to say, because there's more twos, I think.
Okay, Amy, next.
I've got to collect my thoughts for a second. We were talking about why Trump says things and why people believe what he says. And we were also in side chat talking about the mafia. And I think that part of it is the leftists kept Trump in the courthouse, in court for so long, so many years, that he thinks with that in the back of his head, like everything that comes out of his mouth, he's got to consider could end up in a court of law someday. And B, he was raised in New York, in the middle of mafia land. And I'm sure he came up against or had to deal with that in his business dealings. And when you talk about trust and honor in that kind of setting, when you're doing things like testing the waters and seeing who you can trust and putting in the Kurdish separatists, they obviously failed. They're done. They will never be trusted again. These are the things that they're going to be looking for going forward. Dom, I don't know if you can speak to this as far as like after the fall of the Berlin Wall in Russia, how the mafia looked there and how that all unfolded. But that's my take on why he says so much, but he's also always thinking in the back of his head, what can be used against me in a court of law? That was my answer to that.
Okay, Jeffrey.
So, Armin, it's kismet that you said that, because that was part and parcel regarding separating the MEK from broader Kurdish diaspora, because that was part of the discussion I had 20 minutes before I came here. And the goal is to sit there and co-align those diasporas to assist the anti-Mullah elements in Iran, the non-MEK version. So I want to, again, just voice that I very much appreciate the fact that you take time to do that, even though I know you're juggling a lot of chainsaws and the emotional and cognitive load that you're under. Well done, man.
I appreciate you saying that, because one thing that I feel very guilty about is that I'm not spending time with my Persian speaking community. And I feel like because I have very little time, and because the Iran doesn't have connection, so it doesn't make sense to spend time with such a low audience there. But some of them do have connections and they want me to make shows there. And they're asking me where I am, like, please come make some shows. And I'm like not doing it. So it stresses me so much and I feel like I'm betraying them. So, but thank you.
Okay, Ian.
This is more of an operational question, but basically, would taking Bandar Abbas as an example actually force the Strait of Hormuz to be open, or is the threshold of safety for the $1 billion super tankers so low that even standoff weapons can basically close the strait. That's my question.
I think, Jeffrey, you want to respond to that?
There's some truth to that. That said, the no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and the environment is fluid, so it's pretty sure that the adversaries are going to almost assuredly modify their response to what we do. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, or it won't have the impact that it will if indeed it's done with other lines of effort I can't talk about. Either way, that was the issue that Shauna wanted me to talk about real quick, because it's important to this issue that Armin brought up, which is the use of Ukrainian special forces that are trained in how to use FPV drones and other types of, here, forgive me, headaches kicking my ass. Group 1 drones, which are the smaller quadcopter. We have 5 different groupings. It's one of the ways that we do that. So yeah, that's very that's going to have a lot of positive impact, because Ukrainians know exactly what they're doing and they know how to do that under duress. Issue is that even the 2 caveats there, the things that went on when we sat there and assisted the National Opposition Coalition, which was like in 2013 is what it was called, was comprised of about 27 major groups of people. Some of them were not very good, like al-Nusra, Free Syrian Army. Those were like fucked up people, and they were anti-Assad. So as Armin said, the vetting is going to be crucial, and it still takes time to do that. So these are people that are going to be trained, their training has to be accelerated, and that's going to be a challenge. Either way, that's probably your best shot for all the reasons that you outlined for Armin, Shauna, and Ian.
Right, Sketch is next. Sketch. Your mic is closed.
Okay. I wanted to touch on the Strait and on Bandar Abbas. The problem is the insurance. You could open a channel. You could have it cleared and pass boats through there and pass the Navy through there 10 times. If the insurance thinks there's too much danger, the shipping isn't going to go through. It may be okay to get ships out, but it won't put commerce back into play. I think that the Bandar Abbas thing could be a go, and I think, like you said before, that's what they would train from. I think they would start training leaders and teaching them how to train. They might take some test defectors, some people that they got some skin in the game. They would have to prove, they would have to be vetted, of course, but some people that have a little bit of training and a little bit of leadership ability, and they would start by training those, because there's going to be a gap between you training 100, 200, 1,000 infantrymen to you training some sergeants and some captains on how to train other people on your new weapons. If you're using FPV, you got to train people how. If you're using new tech, you got to train them on how to use it. If you're using different squad formations, you got to know what they know. Have everybody on the same page. Okay, this is how you work. Let's see how you work. I think as far as training, and I'd love to Jeff to comment on this, you would start training leaders and then train the leaders on how to train other troops. Some people on the ground might vet everyone, but they're not going to train everyone. It's too many people to train. You would find local leaders and teach them how to train. That would be my guess. That's just from my experience as a grunt. That's the way it goes.
Okay. Jeffrey's response is a bunch of thumbs up. Did you want to say anything else, or can I go to Armin?
I was going to say 100%.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to play Lindsey Graham's 9-minute video before we go to the next book, because I think this is really eye-opening. And so just bear with me while we go through this. I think there's a lot of good information here. So I'm going to share it first on my StreamYard recording, and then I'm going to share it with you guys. So let's watch this together.
Graham, Senator, you shorten that.
Wait, let me go to the beginning here.
Graham, Senator, you shorten that up to mean embargo, blockade plus.
Yeah, blockade plus. Now, what does that mean? I love the idea of a Second Amendment solution for the Iranian people. To those who want to
Second Amendment solution. Love that name, but I love the way he phrases
the idea of a Second Amendment solution for the Iranian people. To those who want to eliminate the Second Amendment in our country, no way. What did the founding fathers do? When they got to America, free from the king, they made sure the people would be able to be armed. The first thing the king does is takes the guns away from his subjects. The first thing a religious theocracy does is make sure that nobody can have a gun to threaten the regime. So if I were President Trump and I were Israel, I would load the Iranian people up with weapons so they could go to the streets armed and turn the tide of battle inside Iran. We don't need American boots on the ground. We've got millions of boots on the ground in Iran. They just don't have any weapons. Give them the weapons so they can rise up like we did to destroy this regime. A Second Amendment solution, I think, would go a long way to ending this war. If we can take control of the Straits, if we can take control of the Straits, checkmate.
Okay, my understanding is there have been attempts to do, and they try to funnel it through oops. My understanding is that, for example, working with the Kurds, they were stealing 90% of the weapons.
Yeah. What? Don't work with the Kurds, work with somebody else. And if you can prove to me the Kurds are stealing the weapons, the Kurds will regret that. I love the idea of empowering the Iranian people with weapons, a Second Amendment solution to make the Revolutionary Guard's life hell. It's one thing to be bombed by America. It's another thing to have your neighbors shoot back at you because they're tired of being slaughtered. Number two, the Strait of Hormuz is the only thing left. This has been a brilliant campaign by President Trump and our military. The nuclear program of Iran has been destroyed. Their ability to spread terrorism has been destroyed because they're on their knees economically. If we can control the Straits, if we can take back control of the Straits of Hormuz, it is checkmate. This thing is over. To the American people, I know gas prices are high and I know we're suffering right now, but you pay now, you pay later against thugs like Iran. They tried to get a nuclear weapon, and if you don't believe that, you shouldn't be allowed to drive in your hometown. Donald Trump stopped Iran from having 8 to 10 nuclear weapons by bombing their enrichment facilities. God bless you, President Trump. We were weeks away from a nuclear-armed Iran. No more. Everything has been obliterated. Their economy is in tatters. Their military has been decimated. There's more to do. If we can control the Straits, checkmate against Iran, blockade plus, arm the people, and to our allies throughout the world who depend on the Strait of Hormuz more than we do, get off your ass and help us.
They haven't been so willing to do. I can't imagine that NATO in its current configuration looks anything like it does today when this is all said and done. I can't believe, I don't see any scenario under which countries like Germany and Spain and France and even Great Britain and Italy have America paying 2/3 of the freight for NATO's security when they didn't have the moral clarity to stand up against a nuclear-armed Iran and the #1 state sponsor of terror.
It is moral clarity. If you believe the Ayatollah and his henchmen would use a nuclear weapon as part of their religious doctrine, you would be right. If you thought otherwise, you would miscalculate like we did with Hitler. Israel cannot get this wrong. One Holocaust is enough. We know, and I know, if Iran had a nuclear weapon, they would use it in the name of jihad. So Donald Trump is a historic figure, and I know the left doesn't like hearing that. He's the man that did something about Iran's nuclear ambition while every other president allowed them to go basically unchecked. How do you have 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium at 60%? They cheat. How do you have missiles that can go to Europe? They cheat. Donald Trump has decimated the missile program. He's destroyed their nuclear capability, and they have been weakened beyond my imagination in 60 days. The only thing left to do is control the Straits, and we can do that. At the end of the day, to our friends in Europe and throughout the world, help us reestablish freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation is a core principle to the world economy. I am proud of Project Freedom. Project Freedom will work, and people should be helping us. What are we trying to accomplish? To allow ships to go through the Straits of Hormuz to help the world economy. That shouldn't be a hard thing to sign up for. As to President Trump, see this through. These guys are on their back foot, Mr. President. You have been brilliant in concept and execution. Just see it through. We're near the end now.
Yeah, I think I need to. I'm dealing with slow internet for some reason. Anyways, I see some clues in the chat. I will download this. There was a part of it that he talks about.
Senator, you shorten that up.
There was a part of it that he talks about the Strait of Hormuz, but I see some twos in the chat. I'll find it while you guys are speaking. Go on.
All right, response from Sketch.
I want to know that he said the Second Amendment like what, 5-6 times at least? I want you to imagine what would happen if the amount of loss of power that the IRGC would have if everyone had the right to be armed. This is another reason why people don't try to fight against America. Yeah, there is a geographical concerns. But even if they could get here, come on. Having a population that is mostly good people, I would say, I don't know, 98% of the people. If you take out the RRGC part, how many people is that? That's still a lot of people, good people that have a right to self-defense. It's when we did the Second Amendment, it's because we just were dealing with a government. It wasn't about self-defense or food or hunting. It was about standing up to a tyrannical government. So I think the way he keeps saying Second Amendment, I hope it gets considered in their constitution, because if they all had a right to defend themselves, any outside force that tries to come in would have a hard time. Any Iraqis that they send would have a very hard time. Anybody else that they send would have a very hard time. And the IRGC would never get a foothold again. So I would like to just touch on that Second Amendment part. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. There's a revolution phase, and then there's a transition phase, and then there's a post-transition phase. So you're talking about the Second Amendment after the transition, and that's like a long time to come.
Constitution.
Yeah, so I would vote for that. I would want a Second Amendment in something like that inside Iran. But right now we're focusing on the revolution part. And even if the Iranians disagree or agree on that, I don't know. I'm just speaking as one vote when it comes to that. But I think that right now, for the revolution, we need guns. So whether or not we want to have guns after the revolution, that's another topic. But right now, we need guns. Right now, we need guns for sure. Is there anyone else on the list, or should I try one more time to finish this? Because I wanted to play the last part.
Yeah, try one more time.
Okay. Sorry, guys, for technical difficulties. I hope you're patient with me.
Proxies generate another October 7th. Victory is near in Iran. To the American people, President Trump got this right in spite of all the critics. God bless you, President Trump, for stopping what would be a nightmare for this world.
It does get difficult when you hear people just speak out of total ignorance and just make things up. Donald Trump did this because of Fox News. Donald Trump did this because of Bibi Netanyahu. Donald Trump didn't do anything of.
Yep, nowhere. I don't know why today this is not working. So I'll give up then. So I'll just let you guys know that. Hold on, let me go stop sharing and share this tab instead. So I'll just let you know that Lindsey Graham also mentioned something regarding how this is important for liberating the Strait of Hormuz, which to me suggests that arming the Iranian people was also his way of liberating the Strait of Hormuz. And that to me suggests that his thinking is in line with what I was suggesting, that this project needs to be done somewhere in Bandar Abbas, so it's not where the expansion of the Iranian army would also help the Strait of Hormuz get liberated. By the way, I don't know if any of this will happen. I'm not suggesting that this will happen or not, but I think this is the best plan. I hope they listen to Lindsey Graham or Amu Lindsey.